Ethan groaned as he rolled onto his side, wincing as a jagged piece of metal pressed painfully against his ribs. The hover vehicle had been one of those experimental models, the kind advertised with shiny hollow ads that promised seamless lunar travel and adrenaline-infused adventure. But in reality, it had been about as reliable as a malfunctioning toaster. He looked around at the canyon, the walls glittering with suspended crystals that caught the dim light of the distant gas giant, and muttered to himself, "Well, at least I died somewhere scenic." His voice echoed back with a hollow sarcasm that even he found annoying. The dust around him shimmered with electric sparks that crackled lazily, as if the planet itself were amused by his predicament. He attempted to lift his ankle, immediately regretting the effort. It had twisted in a spectacularly human way, the kind that left him cursing at physics and his own coordination. He tried pressing the comms device, hoping to send a distress signal, but the screen blinked back a mocking red light. "Transmit failed. Are you sure you're even trying?" it seemed to say. Ethan jabbed the buttons with the tip of his finger. "I'm trying, you sarcastic little death trap," he muttered. He pressed it again, imagining a tiny robotic face on the screen smirking at him. "Fine, I guess it's just you and me, Rock. Your turn to listen, buddy." The rock remained stoically unresponsive, as rocks tend to do, and Ethan sighed. Hours passed. He told the rock his life story, the kind of story only someone facing certain death felt compelled to recount, including embarrassingly vivid details of his most awkward social encounters back on Earth. He debated whether the story would make it into some alien archive if he died here, and if they would judge humans for our fashion choices or obsession with caffeine. The distant hum of the planet was punctuated by occasional pops from the dust storms, like cosmic popcorn, which he found somehow mildly comforting. He tried to get up to look around, limping along painfully, and tripped over a crystal shard, landing face first with a grunt. "Yep," he muttered from the ground, "this is my life now. Glorious." That's when he noticed movement, a shadow flickering across the crystalline canyon walls, moving with fluid precision. Ethan froze. His first instinct was to hide behind the rock, as if a rock could shield him from whatever was coming. Then he remembered he had no plan beyond die quietly. He squinted and saw her. She glided closer, and Ethan noticed her immediately. She looked human, the kind of human that seemed plucked from a serene dream, but her long ears, pointed elegantly upward, betrayed her origin. They twitched slightly like sensors attuned to the world around her. She carried a medkit that glowed faintly with a soft blue light, and her expression was calm, almost amused. Ethan, ever the sarcastic one, couldn't resist. Great. Alien medics now? That's what I get for skipping the user manual of interstellar survival. Lyra knelt beside him without a word, her fingers brushing over his bruises, the touch gentle but firm. He flinched and muttered, "Okay, that tickles or burns, I can't tell." She smiled faintly and continued her work. The gel she applied glimmered, spreading warmth across his skin, mending bruises in a way that made him feel slightly embarrassed for ever doubting alien medicine. "Really?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "I've been stuck here for hours, and this is how you introduce yourself? Healing magic and mystery stairs?" She hummed softly, a sound like wind through crystal trees, and Ethan, despite himself, found it oddly soothing. "I'm guessing mysterious alien nurse is the standard first contact greeting protocol?" he joked. She finally spoke, her voice calm, melodic, carrying a subtle cadence that hinted at humor she didn't fully need to explain. "Better than dying in silence," she said. Ethan stared, halfway between insulted and grateful. "Touché," he muttered, making a small show of wiping imaginary sweat from his forehead. She helped him to his feet, and he hobbled alongside her, wobbling awkwardly over the glowing dust. Ethan's mind, desperate for distraction, started noting every detail of their surroundings, narrating in his head like a sarcastic tour guide. "Here we have Veridia, 7 famous glittering canyon walls, visible from your nearest failing hovercraft, and oh look, sparks. Static electricity to fry your circuits and possibly your dignity." He tried to get a reaction from her, expecting her to ignore him, but she lifted one eyebrow. "You find humor in dying," she said, and Ethan nearly fell over laughing. "Hey, it's either that or talking to rocks. They're lousy conversationalists." They reached a plateau where the wind swirled in spiraling eddies, scattering shards of crystal like tiny stars caught in a storm. Ethan stumbled and almost fell again, but she caught him with a hand on his shoulder. Her long ears twitched toward the wind, catching vibrations he couldn't hear, sensing the subtle currents of danger and apparently bad puns. "You're lucky I like human sarcasm," she said, helping him stabilize. Ethan grinned. "Lucky me," he said, huffing, "or unlucky, depending on whether you're going to heal me or eat me for fun." She tilted her head, amused. "Neither," she replied. "You're not interesting enough yet." They set up a small, makeshift shelter in a cavity of the canyon, where the walls offered some protection from the sporadic electrical storms. Ethan tried to arrange some stones as a seat, making exaggerated, sarcastic comments about his own engineering skills. She watched silently, shaking her head with a faint smile. "Do you always narrate your life like a failing space sitcom?" she asked. "Only when I'm about to die," he replied. They shared a moment of quiet laughter, the kind that echoes in hollow spaces, and Ethan felt the first spark of relief since the crash. He wasn't alone anymore, and somehow the absurdity of his situation was more bearable. As night fell, the canyon shimmered under the glow of distant planets and drifting dust motes. Ethan, leaning against a crystal wall, tried not to think about the loneliness he had felt just hours before. Lyra moved quietly, tending to small injuries he didn't even notice, humming the same gentle, melodic tune. He tried to joke about it again. "Next time, can you hum me a full symphony, or is that reserved for serious emergencies?" She glanced at him, one corner of her mouth twitching in what was almost a smile, almost saying yes without speaking. He realized with a mixture of disbelief and relief that maybe surviving wasn't about being brave or strong or even clever. Maybe it was about finding someone who would care enough to laugh at your terrible jokes while saving your life. And for the first time since the crash, Ethan didn't feel like he'd die alone. Ethan woke to the faint hum of the canyon, a sound like static laced with a soft, melodic vibration that made his teeth tingle in a way he decided was perfectly normal on Veridia 7. He squinted at the weak glow of bioluminescent crystals scattered across the plateau, and noticed Lyra already moving silently among the shards. Her long ears twitched constantly, pivoting toward every minor sound as if the canyon itself were whispering secrets only she could hear. Ethan tried to rise, only to remember that his ankle still resembled a contorted pretzel, and muttered, "Fantastic mobility is overrated anyway." Lyra glanced at him, one eyebrow raised, and said in that calm, melodic voice, "You'll need to eat if you plan on staying upright. Or walking upright, your choice." Ethan smirked, imagining the alien equivalent of a food critic judging his human metabolism. "Sure," he said, "I'll eat, but I refuse to pretend that space granola is gourmet cuisine." He stumbled over a crystal shard and she caught him effortlessly. "Your jokes are hazardous," she said dryly. "You're lucky I find them moderately amusing." Ethan grinned, wobbling to his feet with her support. "Moderately amusing is basically a compliment in human sarcasm. I'll take it." As they prepared to move, Ethan noticed the odd ecosystem of Veridia 7. Rivers of liquid light flowed in fractured channels, bending and shifting like slow-motion rainbows. He leaned over one and splashed the glowing liquid, making a dramatic show of pretending to be a mad scientist discovering alien candy. Lyra's ears twitched at the faint sound of rippling currents, and she gave him a look that clearly meant, "Don't waste my sensory powers on theatrics." "Trust me," Ethan said, "this is highly scientific research. Someone has to document how delicious it looks." She shook her head, smiling faintly, though the twitch of her ears betrayed the amusement she refused to voice. They moved along the canyon floor, navigating around giant crystal trees that whispered in soft, high-pitched vibrations when the wind touched them. Ethan poked one with a stick and muttered, "Yep, definitely sentient. They're gossiping about my footwear choices." Lyra paused and looked back at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "They do not approve," she said. "I can hear their disapproval even without my ears." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Well, at least someone's honest with me today." Hours passed, and the canyon began to open into a wider valley. Ethan's muscles ached, and he resorted to narrating their journey in his usual sarcastic style. "Here we are, survivors of a crash that even the company disclaimers warned about. Witness the glowing crystal forests, the rivers that may or may not be alive, and me, the reluctant hero with a sprained ankle. Truly inspiring." Lyra didn't respond verbally, but she hummed softly as they walked, the sound calming and rhythmic. Ethan decided that if humming were a weapon, she could take over the universe without lifting a finger. Seriously, he said, if you ever go rogue, I can't testify against you. You've got a sound that could hypnotize security systems. Her ears twitched again and she glanced at him, amused. You'd still try to sabotage the alarm codes with bad jokes. Ethan laughed, hobbling along, and realized that despite the danger, traveling with her was almost enjoyable. They reached a set of abandoned alien structures, the walls covered with panels blinking in erratic patterns. Ethan poked at one and it spat sparks in his direction. Ouch, note to self, alien tech is aggressive. Lyra sighed, extending a hand, and the panel's lights dimmed at her touch. Your timing is predictable, she said. Ethan rubbed his arm. Predictably foolish, you mean? She smiled faintly, shaking her head. The structures themselves seemed to hum with residual energy, occasionally opening doors as if curious about their human visitor. Ethan peeked into one room and whispered, "This place looks like a cross between a spa and a sentient vending machine. Great for morale." Lyra didn't comment, just guided him gently onward. As they moved through the structures, Ethan learned more about her. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it was sharp, precise, and occasionally sarcastic, like her words were measured to amuse or disarm simultaneously. Ethan tried to keep up, firing jokes whenever he could. You really do everything gracefully, don't you? I stumble, crash, and generally embarrass myself, and you glide around like a ballerina with a medkit. Lyra's ears twitched. Grace is functional, she said. Embarrassment is not. Ethan chuckled. Functional, huh, got it. I'm filing that under life lessons I'll probably ignore. A sudden tremor shook the valley, sending crystal shards skittering like tiny dancers across the ground. Ethan almost fell but was caught again by Lyra. Earthquakes? He asked. Dust storms, she corrected. And possibly sentient dust, be ready. Ethan grimaced. Sentient dust, that's terrifying. Why am I never prepared for anything on this planet? Lyra only gave a faint smile, scanning the valley with her acute senses. You'll adapt, she said, which Ethan took as encouragement. Or die laughing at my own jokes. Either outcome works. Night fell, and the valley lit up with a pale, phosphorescent glow from the crystals and distant floating orbs that drifted lazily above the terrain. Ethan collapsed onto a flat crystal slab, staring at the alien sky. You ever notice, he said, that stars look a lot less judgmental than people? They just twinkle at you like they don't care if you fall or trip over an alien root. Lyra crouched nearby, applying a minor treatment to his scrapes. Her long ears twitched rhythmically, sensing distant vibrations he couldn't feel. Stars are indifferent, she said, but they are consistent. You could learn from them. Ethan grinned, indifferent and consistent. Good qualities for a rock or a boss. Not bad advice for surviving alien planets either. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that feels out of place in an environment that could kill you at any moment but somehow makes the danger bearable. Ethan realized he had started relying on her more than he'd admit. Her calm efficiency, her quiet wit, and even the way her long ears moved with subtle elegance were becoming comforting. You know, he said, propping himself up slightly, I didn't expect a nurse to be my survival strategy. I thought it'd be more like duct tape, explosives, and sheer stubbornness. Lyra's eyes glimmered faintly in the alien light. Some humans survive that way, she said. You prefer humor and complaining. Ethan chuckled. Well, it works better when someone can stop me from dying. By the time they found a small alcove for shelter, Ethan's muscles were sore, his ankle throbbing, but his spirit was lighter. He realized that survival was no longer just a personal challenge. It was a shared endeavor, punctuated by small jokes, sarcastic observations, and the quiet companionship of someone who could read the land in ways he could never imagine. He leaned against a crystal wall and muttered to no one in particular, maybe dying alone isn't mandatory after all. Lyra hummed nearby, the faint sound threading warmth into the alien night, and for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to feel like he wasn't entirely lost in the vast, indifferent universe. The storm hit without warning, a furious swirl of violet dust and electric arcs that turned the canyon into a writhing chaos of sparks and flying crystal shards. Ethan tried to stand, wobbling on his still healing ankle, and immediately fell flat on his face, coughing up grit. Great, he muttered, spitting dust. If death wants dramatic flair, it's got my number. Lyra appeared beside him in an instant, her long ears twitching as if decoding the language of the storm itself. She grabbed his arm and lifted him with ease. "You're heavier than I expected," she said, her tone flat but not unkind. Ethan gave a weak grin. "That's what years of sarcasm and bad eating habits do for you." They staggered toward a partially collapsed alien structure, the wind shrieking around them like an angry chorus. Ethan clung to her, and despite the chaos, he found himself muttering, "You know, storms are bad, but I never thought I'd be so happy to be dragged around by a nurse with pointy ears." She shot him a glance, amused. "I've had better compliments," she said, steering him past a cascade of falling crystal. Ethan laughed despite the situation. "I guess I'm setting a low bar for flattery then." A massive gust threw him sideways and he landed under a heavy shard of crystal, wincing as pain shot through his leg. "Not again," he groaned. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her ears flicking toward vibrations in the storm. With a precision that made Ethan gape, she manipulated a faint energy field from her hands, lifting the shard like it weighed nothing, and pulled him free. "You might want to try walking without dramatics," she said, her lips twitching in the barest hint of a smile. Ethan rubbed his side. "And miss this chance to be spectacular? Never." As the storm raged, Ethan began noticing the subtle ways Lyra worked. She didn't just react, she anticipated. Her long ears flicked toward unseen currents in the air, guiding them safely over jagged crystal ridges, diverting him from falling debris. She whispered instructions that he had to shout over the roar of the wind, and he found himself trusting her implicitly, even when her plans seemed crazy. Leap over a crack in the canyon while the storm screamed, or hug the side of a glowing spire as if they were doing some alien dance. "I swear," Ethan yelled, "I'll never take a normal sidewalk for granted again." She didn't respond, but her quick glance told him she was silently amused. They reached a narrow alcove protected from most of the flying debris. Ethan collapsed against the wall, gasping. "Okay," he said, "I admit it, you win. You and your ridiculous super ears." Lyra knelt beside him, touching his arm with that same soothing, glowing energy she had used before. "You didn't lose," she said quietly. "You adapted, that's what counts." Ethan looked at her, feeling the weight of everything he'd been through, the isolation, the despair, the sarcastic monologues to rocks, and realized something profound. Survival wasn't just about toughness or skills. It was about connection, about trusting someone else in a universe that had seemed intent on crushing him. The storm's fury began to subside, leaving a strange, eerie calm in the canyon. Dust settled and glowing shards reflected in the faint light from the alien sky. Ethan pushed himself to his knees, taking in the scene. "You know," he said, grinning despite exhaustion, "if I had died here, I'd have spent eternity bragging to ghost rocks about how spectacularly I failed." Lyra allowed herself a small laugh, one that carried through the quiet air. "You may survive," she said, "and you may continue your constant complaining. They are intertwined." They ventured back toward a safer path, Ethan moving carefully but with renewed determination. The canyon seemed less hostile now, as if the storm had cleared not just the air, but some invisible barrier between him and the alien world. They passed rivers of liquid light, and this time Ethan didn't feel like he had to narrate every step, though a few quips slipped out. "I'll never look at bioluminescent rivers the same way again," he said. "Mostly because I almost drowned in one, but also because they're too pretty to complain about." Lyra's ears flicked toward the sound, but she didn't comment. Instead, she guided him past a shifting ridge of crystals, ensuring each step was safe. As they emerged from the canyon into a valley that opened toward a distant landing zone, Ethan's thoughts wandered. He realized how much he had changed. He had entered this world a sarcastic, desperate man, ready to resign to loneliness and despair, and now he had a companion who challenged him, kept him alive, and even managed to make him laugh when death seemed imminent. His humor, once a shield against isolation, had transformed into a bridge between him and Lyra. A way to share a moment of humanity with someone completely different from him, yet intimately connected. The landing zone appeared, a relic of human exploration, half buried in dust but intact. Ethan stumbled toward it, Lyra supporting him, her energy field subtly reinforcing his weakened body. "So," he said, huffing, "I guess I'm officially not dying alone anymore." Unless, of course, we get eaten by a rogue hover drone, then I guess the rock's testimony will be necessary. Lyra chuckled softly. Your humor will survive even if you don't, she said. Ethan grinned. Cheerful, he muttered. I like it. He finally settled in the landing zone, the engines flickering faintly to life as if awakening from a long sleep. Lyra stood beside him, scanning the surroundings with her sensitive ears and quick reflexes. Ethan looked at her, long ears silhouetted against the alien sky, and realized he felt something he hadn't expected. Gratitude that bordered on awe. You saved me, he said simply, more than once, more than just physically. Lyra tilted her head. You saved yourself too, she replied. I only helped along the way. Ethan laughed softly, leaning against the landing pod. That sounds like a motivational poster for aliens. Survive with teamwork, or sarcasm helps digestion of cosmic dust. Lyra's soft chuckle was the only response.